What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button, and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get to it.
All motorsport disciplines are challenging and interesting in their own way. But both in circuit racing, road rally and autocross, the drivers drive on a track with which they have already familiarized themselves in one way or another. For example, in rally, i.e. in the discipline, which is the closest to rally raids both by the current rules and by its very essence, the crew drives every special stage and writes its own legend in which every obstacle and every maneuver is marked. Undoubtedly, the pilot of a rally car must demonstrate filigree skill of controlling his combat vehicle and in very difficult conditions. There may be gravel, ice and snow under the wheels, but he constantly receives tips from the navigator. When he hears the command of 50 right, 3 to the left, 2 through the ramp, he clearly knows that in 50 meters there will be a right turn, after which the car will jump, and immediately after that it will be necessary to enter a fairly gentle high-speed turn to the left side. But in rally raids and any other off-road races, the road book contains only navigation information. The pilot drives with his eyes, i.e. he needs to assess the complexity of obstacles in front of him, and to do it instantly. On the highway, raiders sometimes roll under 150, or even faster. Wrongly assess the turn, and please, ears. You can't cheat physics. But the most important thing is not even that. The main thing is that raid crews have to constantly solve two absolutely opposite tasks. On the one hand, a race is a race, and it is necessary to drive on special sections with the highest possible speed, at the limit of own forces and car capabilities. And on the other hand, a marathon is a marathon that lasts for many days, and the length of the route is thousands of kilometers. And fatigue tends to accumulate, both in people and metal products. There is one more aspect. In the case of road ring races, it is simply impossible to get lost. In rally races it is theoretically possible, but unrealistic, and in the worst case a navigational error can only lead to loss of time and positions in the final protocol. But in case of rally raids everything is different. Here an error in orientation and loss of the route can end in the most sad way. Thus, at the 2010 Silkway Rally, the leader in the off-road category, South American Genial de Villas, almost lost his life. He himself told about it as follows: "The section was very difficult in terms of navigation, and I'm not sure that we did not deviate from the route. The car hit a pothole that I didn't notice, flipped over and was left lying on its roof. The impact was very strong." And there are many such cases. Actually, the canonical history of the most famous rally raid, Paris-Dakar, began with the fact that the famous rally driver Thierry Sabine, participating in 1977 in another rally, Abidjan-Nice, got lost in the sands of Niger, deviated from the route for 50 kilometers. And if his friend Jean-Michel Sine did not go in search of him on a light-engine plane, then, most likely, would have died of thirst and dehydration. In the end, Thierry decided that he himself should organize a more correct race, and in 1978 the first Dakar took place. Yes, the Dakar was not the first marathon race at all. And it all started with fantastic races Peking, Paris and New York, Paris, which took place in 1907 and 1908 respectively. In due course, we told you about them in great detail. Then there were Rally Marathon Morocco. This race was held from 1934 to 1988. With a break for the Second World War, Rally Méditerranée, Le Cap, 16,000 kilometers from the Mediterranean to the Cape Peninsula. In South Africa, Kenyan Rally Safari with the length of 6,000 kilometers, first held in 1953. It is impossible not to remember the London-Sydney Marathon held in 1968, where the team of the Soviet Auto Export on Moskvich 408s performed quite successfully. And there was a real off-road on the track. By the way, until 1979, four-wheel drive in rally was prohibited, and only with its legalization began rally raids in the form that we are used to seeing. And now, closer to the native birches. It so happened that in 2008 Dakar was cancelled, officially, because the authorities of Mauritania could not guarantee safety. And unofficially they say that it was only an excuse, and in reality the matter was that the French company Sport Organisation, ASO, was very dissatisfied with the current practice of interaction with the authorities of African countries. ASO management was very annoyed that when they organized the famous cycling race, Tour de France, all regional administrations pay them for the right to host the race, especially since these costs are easily recovered. But here they had to pay Mauritania and Senegal themselves. So, in 2009, the Dakar moved across the ocean to South America. And then it turned out that for many European races the logistics costs were simply prohibitive. Indeed, try to get from Europe to the other side of the world with fighting cars, technicians and all the necessary equipment. The equipment has to be shipped by sea, and a month or two before the start of the race. As a result, the first Africa race was held in 2009, following the traditional Dakar route, with the start in Marseille and the finish in the capital of Senegal. But we, too, in Eurasia, have enough steppes and deserts on which it is possible to lay the most interesting routes. And in 2009 the first marathon rally raid, Silk Road, took place, which started in Kazan, passed through the territory of Kazakhstan, and finished in Ashgabat, the capital of Turkmenistan. The name turned out to be very successful. The Great Silk Road, the medieval route by which trade caravans carried Chinese goods to Europe and the Middle East, was not a single established road. It was made up of many separate segments, merging together and dividing arms. In a word, it was a great groundwork for the organizers of future rally raids. Silk Road, initially given the status of an international race, quickly gained popularity. But do not think that it became a complete alternative, invented in spite of Dakar. The Silk Road start lists have always included many Dakar participants and many factory teams, including, of course, Karmaz Master, participated in both races. Despite its international status, from 2009 to 2013 the Silk Road routes ran exclusively through Russian territory. No order decided the organizers, and in 2016 the race got a new breath. The Chinese Automobile and Motorcycle Federation, CAMF, joined the organizers, and from 2016 to 2019 the marathon always started in one of the Russian cities and finished in one of the PRC cities. Well, and then in the history of the raid intervened pandemic COVID. In 2020 the race was cancelled at all, and in 2021 when laying the route had to be limited to the territory of the Russian Federation. The same factors continued in 2022, so we went to Astrakhan for the start of the Silk Road 2022. It is not the first time for this city to host rally raids. One of the most difficult stages of the Russian Championship in this discipline, the Gold of Kagan, takes place here in our time. We told about this race in great detail, and the Silk Road has already started in 2018 and finished in 2013 here. In general, the organizers are familiar with everything here. But for me, strangely enough, it was the first time to visit a rally raid of this level. And my first impression is that an event of this level is a kind of symphony for a large orchestra, a suspenseful novel with a preface, prologue and epilogue, between which the actions of many characters develop. Alas, I had a chance to read only the first chapters, so do not expect me to tell you about all the vicissitudes of sports wrestling. Frankly speaking, those who are really interested in what was happening on the track, it is better to watch video reports from the race. Because in fact rally raids, from the point of view of an ordinary spectator, are surprisingly unspectacular, pardon the tautology. But not because nothing happens in these races. Not at all. Simply all the most interesting things happen somewhere very far away, in places where it is almost impossible to reach not only people from the outside, but also accredited press. Only journalists of TV channels accompanying the participants by helicopter see everything, and the others can watch how one by one sports cars leave the start, or cheer for someone at the finish line. For a long time the symbols of rally raids have been trucks and powerful off-road vehicles of the T1 category. Well, everything is more or less in order with trucks. The famous Karmaz trucks will fight for the victory at the Silk Road 2022. And the MAZ and GAZ raid teams will compete with them. But the list of the T1 category has obviously become shorter, although, of course, the starting list includes very big names, Vasiliev, Krodov, Rudskoy. And if it were not for three Gazelnex teams of GAZ raid competing in the same category, the whole intrigue would be reduced to the competition of three crews, Vasiliev and Kuzmich on BMW X5, Krodov and Jiltsov on Mini John Cooper Works, and the crew Rudy i.e. two Andreevs, Rudsky and Rudnitsky, on G-Force Proda NL bars. And this would mean that a place on the podium at the finish line would be guaranteed to each of the participants. But in the T3 category, i.e. side-by-side motorcycles in rallying parlance, Kibitoks, if not a full house, then a clear revival, 15 registered participants, including the most experienced Anastasia Nefontova and Sergei Karyakin. Here the fight will be absolutely uncompromising, especially since in the same category is the most interesting newcomer, Nikita Mazepin, who changed the cockpit of the F1 car of Haas team to a place behind the wheel of A. Kubitka. In fact, the ranks of participants of the T1 category will continue to thin, and the number of motorcycle races will only grow. The reasons for this are purely economic. Motorsport, of course, is not a cheap thing, and Kubitkas also cost by no means pennies, but preparation and maintenance during the competitions of such machines is much cheaper than powerful off-road vehicles. But the prologue gave both spectators and press other opportunities. Relatively short, only 4.93 kilometers, the route of this zero stage was laid along the bank of the Volga River. Half of the route was dirt, half sand dunes. And where there are dunes, there are beautiful turns with sand flying from under the rubbery wheels and the roar of motors on ascents. True, motorized bikes do not roar. They rather squeal. And the next day, the participants started the first real special stage of 226 kilometers. We went straight to the press point, located 7 kilometers from the start. Why exactly there? As a rule, the press is given the coordinates of 1 or 2 press points on the highway to which there are some roads leading to them, which can be traveled by a crossover. And there is one important condition: each press car has an online tracker, and the organizing committee strictly monitors that the press cars do not go to the racetrack and do not cross it. Such points were also issued to the driver of the car that drove my colleagues and me. Everything is fine, but it turned out that there are speed limits in the area of the point because of the field gas station, and if you go farther away on foot, their sections of the track are almost straight lines without interesting turns and jumps. The steep hairpins near the very point the participants passed slowly, pensioner style. What to do? No one wants to get a penalty time. By the way, do you know how to recognize from afar which crew is approaching you in a dust cloud, a MAZSPOR Tavto or a Karmaz Master? If there is another black cloud above the dust cloud, it is definitely a bonneted MAZ. Only this truck has an exhaust pipe above the cab, and only it throws out dense black smoke clouds on over throttle. We waited a long time for some favorites to appear at the point, but we didn't wait for them. We found out the reasons only after returning to the bivouac. Yes, the unpredictability of rally raids began to affect us from the first day. For example, Anastasia Nefontova's ambitions were not followed by the equipment. First, the driveshaft broke and the car became rear-wheel drive. The crew tried to continue the race in monodrive mode, but then the drive of the rear axle sheared off. Anastasia and her navigator Ekaterina Jardanova tried to move one of the front drives back, but they failed. As a result, a crash and big penalties. But the mechanics of all teams had a lot of work to do. Crew number 216 from Kazakhstan performed i.e. made a flip over the roof, and its pilot, Kirill Chernkov, long and emotionally told his Akhtar Motorsport teammates how it happened. The transmission of the Rudy crew prototype failed. As a result of unsuccessful landing after a jump, the front axle of Sukhovenko and Chapayev's Gazelle next tore off. The springs of Alexei Vishnevsky's Karmaz broke, and the front wheels of another Karmaz, Sergei Kuprianov's Karmaz, went into a lump. In general, I was walking around the bivouac, watching the hard work of technical teams, and a phrase from an old army anecdote was going around in my head: pilots fly, mechanics fix parts. This work is not visible to spectators, their names are not called by reporters, but we must always remember that behind any victory on the racetrack is absolutely selfless labor of mechanics. And this is where the mobile service for diagnostics of equipment on the basis of analyzing the working oil came in handy. It was provided by the technical partner of the race, Gazprom Neft's G-Energy motor oil brand. We have recently told you what this service is and why it is needed in great detail. The mobile laboratory is deployed in the field at each bivouac. Its main tools are 3 compact instruments: an infrared spectrometer, an X-ray spectrometer, and a mini viscosimeter, as well as artificial intelligence-based software. The infrared spectrometer shows the alkaline number, oxidation, nitration, and soot content. The X-ray spectrometer shows the oils content of wear metals and additive metals, and the mini viscosimeter shows the oil's viscosity at 100 degrees Celsius, because that is the temperature at which the oil will run in the engine. All of this together allows you to identify the culprit of abnormal operation of the motor or box on the basis of impurities in the working oils in advance, before the problem becomes apparent, and therefore take all the necessary measures in advance. Now it was very important for Anastasia Nefontova's team to know what caused the breakdowns, defects of the failed components themselves, or some problems with the boxes. After all, if the matter is in the gearbox or transfer case, the breakdowns will be repeated even if all the damaged parts are replaced. Fortunately, the gearbox turned out to be perfectly fine. But every team has its own problems, and it is not by chance that 4 more crews used the services of the laboratory on the first day. Besides, Anastasia not only participated in the race in a competitive mode, but at the same time conducted oil tests in an extreme mode. The intelligent ACF technology for oil adaptation to the operating conditions was tested exactly in motorsport. The laboratory experts collected data on the performance characteristics of oils after each special stage. And the obtained data will help to improve not only sports but also civil G-energy oils, which are available to the ordinary motorist. The next day the point offered to us turned out to be a time control point. Practically, passing this point looks like this: the car stops near the sign, the navigator holds out a card in the window, the marshal puts a stamp on it, and do you think that the combat vehicle roars off in a cloud of dust? No, the restriction is still in effect. Pilots only open up a few hundred meters from the control point. But some of them stay at this point for a much longer period of time. The thing is that there is a refueling point organized by the network of Gazpromneft gas stations. Trucks and off-road vehicles pass it without stopping. Their tanks are big enough for a couple of 100 kilometers, so they refuel at bivouacs directly from gas tankers. But the motor vehicles and two-wheeled knights of the desert have to refuel here. On the off-road, the way to gasoline trucks is closed, so they have to carry high-octane gasoline G-Drive 100 in barrels. Everything was organized very clearly. The refueling team worked like clockwork, and still there was a queue near the refueling point, just like at an ordinary gas station. However, the crews did not express any displeasure about it. The time for refueling will be taken into account, and the extra minutes allow you to put in your body a G-Drive energy bar from the race's dry rations or just drink. A person loses moisture in such heat, and the temperature in the Astrakhan steppe was up to 35 degrees in the shade very intensively, especially if you are packed in a helmet and racing overalls. Here we waited for Nastya Nefontova, who complained a lot about the dust. Well, yes, it is one thing to ride among the leaders and leave a dusty plume after yourself, and quite another to swallow dust in a dense group of middle-level participants, where Nastya was thrown by yesterday's breakdown. But since there was time, she could even wash her face. As I am typing these lines, the drivers are fighting with the off-road on the Volgograd-Lipetsk section. There are constant changes of leaders in the overall standings, and we will know the final result tomorrow, after the official finish. But since I'm not there, I have no immediate impressions, so you'd better watch video reports and read the official bulletins. Well, I'll be cheering for the athletes together with you. I'm really curious whether Anastasia Nefontova will be able to catch up with the leaders, because she managed to take the first place on the 8th SU. However, in any case, she did not fight with the track, car and rivals in vain. After all, this year Anastasia Nefontova not just drove the race, but also tested oils in extreme conditions. The information about testing and performance characteristics of lubricants was collected by the laboratory experts after each special stage, and on the basis of this data G-energy experts, who are engaged in the development of high-tech oils, will improve civil formulations, which will be available to ordinary motorists. But this is not the only question I was interested in. Which of the GAZ raid pilots, Ruzanov or Sukhovenko, will manage to climb the third step of the podium? Will Sergei Vyazovich hold the third position? It is already clear that he will not be able to become the first this time. Actually, when the material will be published, the answers to all these questions will be already received, but I will know them at the same time with you. And for now I can only say, the rally marathon. As we conclude our exploration of the Silk Road, we reflect on how this ancient trade route was not just a pathway for goods, but a bridge for cultures, ideas, and innovations. Spanning thousands of miles, it connected diverse civilizations and laid the groundwork for global exchange that continues to influence us today. The Silk Road reminds us that every great journey begins with a single step, and it is through these connections that we can learn, grow, and appreciate the rich tapestry of human history. Thank you for joining us on this journey through time.